Good morning or good afternoon, depending where you are, and welcome to Entropia Gaming. Today we're going to go over, well, the end of last year. We're going to start with the little game that could. Shadow Warrior 2 is a game that got very little in the way of overall marketing. They made some showings at game shows, but beyond that, all they really did was release some trailers on Steams and a couple websites. No real TV marketing, no real big ad campaigns. Beyond that, they also released their game at a lower price point than what the going rate is. I think they released at $40 and even gave a discount if you owned the first game. So this is a game where, as far as marketing goes, they very much relied on word of mouth. Now, this is a big contrast to some of the games we're going to talk about later, and that's the whole point of today's podcast, contrast. The end of the year was a big study in contrast, and this first entry is a game that kind of did everything right. It kept its budget low with the lower marketing costs, and that's kind of what worked for it in a big way because it allowed them to put all that money towards optimization, which is something that a lot of games struggle with these days. We see even big companies struggling with that, but I'm not going to go too much into that today because I've actually got a big editorial piece coming next time on optimization and where people keep screwing it up. But suffice to say, Shadow Warrior 2 put a lot of effort into making sure it was properly optimized when they released on PC, and still making sure that it ran well on consoles, because this was a multi-platform game. All but one of our games today was were multi-platform, in fact. Now, then became the release. Now, love it or hate it, they deviated from the original game, which was your classic on-rails shooter. They went more for procedurally generated. It was what people thought they were going to get. What they actually got was, oh god, what's the term? It slips my mind at the moment. But basically, they had sections of the map that basically were fitted together. So we're not talking fully randomized, but we're not talking on-rails either. And so the maps themselves aren't fully randomized, but they're not fully static either. So every time you load in, it's a little bit different, but a little bit of the same thing. Now, this keeps the game fresh, keeps it from being stale every time you load back in, which is a good thing. But at the same time, it kind of pissed off some of the die-hard fans of the first game. Furthermore, they decided to go kind of with a loot farming system, both in terms of upgrades and of weapons. Optional bosses in each map drop gear or power-ups, and all enemies have a chance to drop items which can be used to augment your weapons. It turned the entire game into one massive loot farm. Now, if you like games like Borderlands, this is a great thing. If you were looking for a classic old school shooter like the first Shadow Warrior, flip a coin, you're either going to love it or you're going to hate it. Now me, it was great. I had fun with it, no big deal. But if you go into the forums when the game launched, there was a lot of vitriol, a lot of anger, a lot of pissing and moaning, basically. But, you know, pissing and moaning seems to be what happens when indie games release these days, so we're not going to focus too much on that, to be honest. Point being, the game itself, pretty solid, pretty good game, and the thing to take away, though, is it ran smoothly. Well optimized, drop-in, drop-out co-op. Would have been nice. They said they were going to try and do it. To my knowledge, they still haven't. But what they did give us was a co-op mode where you could basically set up when you start your game to say, I want to play in an environment that's scaled to 4 players. And at that point, the scaling's done. Dynamic scaling is what I'm saying would have been better, but it's not. And at that point, you then could send invites to friends. Friends could join your game. The multiplayer is pretty solid. So it's a game that's well optimized. They put all the money they saved by not marketing the game heavily into the optimization and relied on word of mouth to sell the game. And that's a strategy that worked for them. They then were able to take the money they made because word of mouth marketing worked for them and turn around and hit our second bullet point here, free aftermarket optimization. Or free aftermarket support. They released a major patch near the end of the year in December where they actually added an entirely new currency to the game where if you go back and replay missions, you actually get a new currency that you can use to further upgrade weapons. And by further upgrading these weapons, you're basically beefing everything up. More damage, which lets you do higher difficulties, basically adds to the replay value that much further. If you were having trouble on higher difficulties, you can grind those lower difficulties to get those orbs of Masamune, turn around, dump it into your gear, go right back at it, have some fun with it that way. So that's the gist of the game there. And what we're seeing there with Shadow Warrior is not blowing your budget on a giant marketing campaign can work. Because it lets you spend the money where the money really needs to go, optimizing your game, giving free aftermarket support, which the fans love because they don't have to shell out money on DLC. And we all know people bitch about spending extra money on DLC. Which brings us to Dishonored 2. One of the elephants in the room from the end of the year. Giant marketing campaign. My lord, you couldn't turn on your TV without seeing ads for Dishonored 2 at one point during the year. Which isn't bad. Everyone and their mother knew about it. And it ran great on consoles. Heaven forbid you picked it up on PC, though. Because if you did, flip a coin. Heads, you were lucky, and it ran okay. Tails, your frame rate was gonna kill you. Now, we'll give them some credit. It's their first in-house engine. They built it from the ground up. But this is where maybe they shouldn't have gone so big on the marketing campaign. Maybe they should have taken some of that money and worked a little more on the optimization. Maybe they should have spent a little more time making sure the game ran smoothly. Instead, they went big on marketing and spent a little less time on optimization, and there was a lot of blowback as a result. Now, the game itself, it's a good game. I have a few complaints about it, don't get me wrong, nothing's perfect. The instance for me is the fact that if you play as Corvo, it doesn't really feel like a new game. Corvo is still Corvo. Not a lot of new abilities introduced for Corvo, kind of just evolutions of what you've already seen and some new passives. So if you played Dishonored 1, you know what you're going to get with Dishonored 2 if you choose to play as Corvo. Now, if you choose to play as Emily, on the other hand, well, then you're good to go. You're going to have a whole new experience, new abilities, a kind of a new dynamic. And I think that's kind of what they assumed people were going to do. Because, new game, new character. Now, that's great, don't get me wrong. But at the same time, I kind of wish they'd put a little more effort into kind of evolving Corvo as kind of the standing character, But they didn't. So I think that's kind of a wasted opportunity. So far, Steam tells me there's no DLC yet beyond the pre-order stuff. And again, they spent their money on marketing as opposed to their optimization. And For me, one pet peeve I had with Dishonored had nothing to do with the game, nothing to do with the marketing, but had to do with how they packaged things. Now, me, I got the collector's edition. I love the fact that I got, Corvo's mask on my shelf. Don't get me wrong. But I'm getting kind of tired of companies that are tying, copies of the previous game to your installation of the new game, or tying it to the DLC for the new game, because, they're assuming, oh my lord, you couldn't possibly have played the first game. Now, me, I would have loved to have been able to just give a code to somebody. That would have been nice. But no. That's just a small pet peeve, Little irksome. Wish companies would think that through a little bit better, because if they did, then they might actually get more sales, because, you could hand that copy to someone, and if they liked the game, then they would go out and buy the sequel, and that'd be another sale they might not have had, Smarter marketing versus bigger marketing, I guess, is the gist of what I'm saying. Market smarter, not bigger. Save a little money that way that you can then again put towards optimizing your shit. That way we can have frame rates that work, and less crashes to desktop on PC, because in case you haven't gathered here, I play most of my stuff on PC. Now, I'm by no means biased. I also have a stack of consoles plugged into my big screen, because there are always going to be those exclusives, and you got to be able to pick up whatever you want to play. Which kind of brings us to Let It Die. Kind of one of those elephants in the room. Let It Die is an interesting beast. And we're going to go back and kind of do full reviews on some of these games once I give you the general rundown, so to speak. Let It Die is an interesting beast. Let It Die is a game from Suda51, which is a company that people either love or hate. Me, you gotta flip a coin. Some of their games really pull me in. Some of their games are just a little odd for me. But for the most part, I like their stuff. I got friends who live and die by Suda51, so I always gotta check them out. Now, that brings us to Let It Die. Now, this game's exclusive to the PS4. And the interesting thing here is that Let It Die takes place in what they call the Tower of Barbs, and it's the typical quirky Suda51 game. You basically load into, for lack of a better term, synthetic bodies and attempt to climb the Tower of Barbs. And that's the short version. The longer version here is going to be that the game focuses essentially on very little in the way of hand-holding. You're going to learn to either dodge and deal with enemies almost in a Dark Souls light. It's nowhere near as brutal as games like Dark Souls, but it's kind of got that kind of vibe where there's not going to be a lot of hand-holding. You're going to either learn to dodge or you're going to die a lot. And dying a lot is going to bring us to the second bullet point later on. But you fight through it, defeating enemies. They have a chance to drop weapons or armor. You pick up gear as you go. You find materials, which later on you can use to craft additional armor or weapons. But you can only craft stuff at your base of operations. So you got to get to elevators to take you back down as you're going up, because you can only craft at the base. So as you're climbing, every so many floors, you'll find an elevator that takes you back down, do your crafting, take the elevator back up, resume your climb. Not too complicated of a game. Now, this is a game that didn't get a lot of marketing at all. I think they showed it a couple times at shows. That's kind of Suda51's deal. They don't really do a whole lot of commercials. They don't do a lot of over-the-top marketing. But it is what it is. The game itself plays pretty solidly. It plays well. Now, that said, I think keeping it exclusive to the PS4, while it seems a good deal, for PS4 players, I think given the nature of the game and how it handles deaths, not the best deal for Suda51. I think going multi-platform probably would have suited them better. Putting it both on the Xbox One and the PS4 probably would have got them, a better turnout. Because the way the game works is when you die, your body basically respawns. This is what's called a hater, which is essentially a monster, a beefed up monster that if you kill it, you can get your stuff back. And the way that their pseudo PvP works is other people's haters can also spawn on your map. So you don't actually fight other players, but you fight their corpses, so to speak. And that's a way to get better gear. So I think the exclusivity, in a respect, kind of drives for them a smaller market share. And well, that's always how Suda51 has handled their marketing. In this case, where the dynamic of the mechanics of the game rely on user base so much, I think that could be problematic. Now, this brings us to the interesting way the game is set up, because the game itself is free. You could go right now, if you have a PS4, to the store and download the game for free. Zero buy-in. But you only have so many respawns in a given day. Now, each day you basically get free loots or treasures as well. But the gist of it is, you only get so many of what are called death medals. Now, death medals can be spent on insurance, they can also be spent on upgrades, but you only get so many a day. Now, that means if you're not spending real-world currency, if you're not spending cash, it limits what you can do. And so the buy-in is free, but there's an ongoing cost to play, or there's a stopgap in progress each day. I think it's something like 3 deaths a day or something like that. And heaven forbid you want to use those. You want to use your death medals to upgrade your belt so you can carry more items, or you want to use them on research. Because then you're going to end up eventually having to buy more, which means you're going to have to spend money on this game. And so they give you the game for free. You're not dropping $60 on the game, but if you get heavily into the game, you're probably going to spend more than $60 on the in-game currency. So it's a little bit of a catch and release sort of system. It's like they got you caught, and they're going to let you go unless you give them more money. So you kind of take and leave it. Now, so what we have here between these 3 games, and this is where the name of the podcast comes in, year end in contrast, is we were seeing games with, done with word of mouth marketing with stuff like Shadow Warrior that can be fairly successful because the game is well put together and well optimized. Because they took the money they didn't spend on marketing and they used it to make the game better. They used it to benefit the player. And that's a brilliant way to do it. You know, let the players draw their friends in. You know, put it up on Steam sales. Put your franchise on Steam sales. Let that be your marketing. So people that are curious see it on sale and go, "Oh yeah, well maybe I'll give it a try." You know, a very low cost form of marketing, and then let the game speak for itself. You know, let that free aftermarket support make your consumer base happier. And Devolver Digital, I think, as a publisher, has done brilliantly with that approach. As opposed to Dishonored 2, which their big misstep was that Bethesda changed their review policy and said no one gets any review copies until right before the game comes out. So no one knew that there were these issues with the PC version because of Bethesda's review policy. And so no one knew about this issue with optimization that came about. And we don't know per se that it's because they spent so much money on the marketing campaign, but we do know that it happened. And we do know that we didn't find out about it until basically the day of launch. And so people bought into the marketing campaign, bought the game, and at least on Steam digital sales, they turned around and refunded it. You know, that's got to hurt the company. So you spend all the money on marketing instead of making sure the game runs well, and it hurts your sales. See, that's the contrast there. And then we have Suda51, the strange little beast here that doesn't really market at all, and they're just hoping that their strange dynamic, their addictive gameplay is going to bring people in. And that they're essentially using the MMO cash shop mentality to fuel gameplay, to speed up gameplay, and hoping that people will basically, you know, fund their game that way. And it's a very strange beast in that respect. I mean, it's very profitable if MMOs are anything to judge by. And so if they can get enough of a user base, the game will make the money back. The question is, Suda51 has always made games that are, you know, mostly kind of this little, you know, kind of fan niche game. Will they get enough to, you know, really turn a big profit off that, you know, microtransaction basically mentality? And I think that's the question in the long run. That's the question of buying the game versus essentially renting it to you. And that's what we'll have to wait and see for them. Those are our contrasts at the end of the year with these three titles. You know, lower price, lower marketing, but just brilliantly optimized. Full price, big marketing, but lots of issues. And just, here's the game, but we're going to charge you for stuff. You know, different ways of handling things. Now, that said, are the games worth it? Well, if you like Suda51, and you like stuff like, you know, Dark Souls, you know, you don't want a game that's going to hold your hand, Let It Die is a fun little game. Now, like I said, be aware, unless you're willing to spend some cash, it's going to be a grind, and you're only going to get so far each day if you let yourself die. So until you get the hang of it, there's going to be a learning curve, and there's going to be some slowdown. Once you get the hang of it, you're probably going to get a little bit further. But because of the durability system on gear, and because of, you know, unless you're spending money on additional respawns, it's always going to feel like a bit of a grind. So it really depends on the player whether the game is worth picking up or not. It's not one that, I can outright say this is a great game, go pick it up. It's very much, it depends on the person. Dishonored 2, it's actually a really fun game when it works. If you've got it on console, you're set. Go ahead, have fun. Great story. It literally picks up story from the first game and the DLCs, so it feels very organic, very natural. It's just really well put together when it works. On PC, you're kind of flipping a coin, hoping your machine doesn't get frame rate drops or that they, finish patching everything. So, it's a little hit and miss on PC. But again, overall, I'd say it's a fairly solid game. Not bad, but it could use a little work. I think the winner for me, though, is Shadow Warrior 2. Less expensive in terms of the purchasable games. If you like loot shooters in any way, or you like the blood and gore, the more visceral style first-person shooters, it very much delivers. It's got a quest-based system to kind of let you go do missions on the side, or you can just blaze through on the story if that's the type of player you want to be. The combat is visceral. There are numerous weapons. You basically choose how you want to play in that respect. You customize the special abilities of the weapons using augments that drop from enemies, so you can tailor each weapon to overcome some of its drawbacks or to suit your play style. So it's a very flexible game. It plays well solo. It plays well with friends. It comes up on the Steam sales fairly often, so if you don't want to drop, $40 or so, $40-50, that's cool. You can wait. Let me double check here. I want to say it's actually 40, but like I said, they come up on the Steam sales so often that that's really not even a problem, because you can always just wait for it. Yeah, it's $40, but the franchise comes up on the Steam sales all the time, so you can always just wait for it. But I think for me, Shadow Warrior 2 is the big winner out of the 3 games talked about today. For me today, I think that's about all we got. I can't really tell if Twitch is even agreeing with me today, so hopefully the recording aspect of this has gone well, and we'll put it up on LZH's website, and we'll see you all next time when we'll probably do a little bit of an editorial piece talking about some of the issues with the gaming industry. We'll hope to see you there.